From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Ciara Speller. According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, high interest rates in low housing and rental stock have led to a housing crisis nationwide. Extremely low-income households spend more than half of their income on housing. In 1983, Massachusetts became a right-to-shelter state, the only one in the country. Governor Maura Healey issued a shelter cap this fall, as shelters across the state became full with waiting lists. So today on 22 News in Focus, we'll be discussing the ongoing housing crisis in the state and what's being done to help individuals and families in our region. Joining me now is State Senator John Vilas, who sits on the state legislature's Joint Committee on Housing. We thank you for being on the program.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
So I first want to ask you, why is Massachusetts seeing such a demand for emergency housing assistance?
Massachusetts, over the last several years, has absolutely just fallen way behind in terms of housing production. At the most fundamental level, I would argue these housing crisis that we now find ourselves in is really that demand far exceeds supply. There's just nowhere to go. And one of the fascinating things about this is it impacts literally all components of housing: renting, owning, interest rates, everything. And there's not an area of the Commonwealth who's immune from this. There are many drivers of this, but the main one is that demand far exceeds supply, and we need to build. And I'm convinced that will help bring the cost down. And obviously, we also just don't have houses for people to live in as well. So building, I would argue, is first and foremost the main focus of where we need to go with our legislative efforts.
And so taking a current look at the rate of need, do you think the state system is going to fail?
I think if you look at where we are right now and the fact that the governor has filed literally a $4.1 billion housing bond bill, and I think some of the things that we in the legislature have done recently with programs like HDIP, we've $100 million for housing production. And again, the bond bill that is out there, I think we're going down the right path. The one kind of what's really challenging this right now and really creating this friction point right now is obviously emergency assistance that we have going on right now. And I'm speaking specifically about kind of the migrant challenges that we have right now in Massachusetts. Just by way of background, this calendar year alone, we've already spent $600 million, and that money is going to run out by the spring. And we know, because the governor told us yesterday, that she is projecting that fiscal year 25 will be about $9.2 billion. $900 million. So just under $1 billion for fiscal year 25. So where I'm at with this is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I don't know if I'd say it's going to fail, but what I will say with absolute certainty is that if we don't figure this situation out, if we don't identify an off-ramp for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we just can't print money. And we're getting to a point, I would already argue that we are at that point where at some point in time, we're going to have to choose. And I think a lot of it is based on what our values are. Do we want to continue to fund kind of this program that's really not going away? I don't see, if there is an off-ramp, I haven't seen it. And the problem is that all of the other programs that we hold near and dear to our heart, roads, bridges, treatment beds for the opiate crisis, K through 12 education, at some point in time, that's going to be impacted, where it's going to be either or. We can't do this indefinitely. And this is going to be my time when I say again, I just told you that Massachusetts has spent $600 million this calendar year, projected almost $1 billion next calendar year, and we've gotten $2 million only from the federal government. Immigration is a federal issue, and if we don't get help from our partners in the federal government, we're going to go a long way towards not being able to the status quo is unsustainable, and we need help.
Yeah, and you've been really vocal on Beacon Hill about getting some more resources here in Western Massachusetts. What else do you think can be done to alleviate the situation?
Built. I think, Matt, so what are the challenges that we have out here? So if you look at the housing crisis that we have here in Massachusetts, it's different wherever you are in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. What's different in Boston's different from Westfield, different from West Springfield, different from Worcester. But even if you just look at my district, right, you've got the rural, you've got suburban, and then you've got urban. And kind of in the urban areas, what you have is, the cost of redeveloping property is really, really expensive. In the suburban side, it's really the restrictive zoning practices that are out there. That's a really big challenge that we have right now. And in the more rural areas, you're dealing with things like sewers, water, and broadband internet. So we need to be very careful and very tailored in how to respond to this. So one of my jobs is going to be, as we debate this housing bond bill, which we're going to have our hearing in January sometime, is to ensure that obviously Western Mass gets its fair share. That goes without saying. But we also need to recognize that within Western Massachusetts, there's just a broad array of different needs that we also need, depending on where you fall, kind of in that rural, suburban, urban, kind of where you are on that spectrum. The other thing that I also bring up too, that I think we need, everybody understands that in Massachusetts, we've got a housing crisis. It is literally one of the main drivers of causing people to leave Massachusetts. And I'm not talking about the debate that we had when we had the millionaires tax debate. That's obviously a factor, although those numbers are just coming in right now. We don't know the impact. I'm really talking about that 20 to 40-year-old demographic where we're seeing numbers right now where people just aren't coming to Massachusetts. And if they're here, many of them are leaving Massachusetts because there's, again, no affordable housing. And that's something that transcends the entire Commonwealth. And why this becomes a really big deal for Massachusetts is one of the claims to fame in Massachusetts has always been all of the industries that we have here, high-tech industries, healthcare, the best in the world. But one of the things that COVID taught us and other states are taking advantage of is that if people can't afford to live somewhere, they're not going to live there. And with remote employment and being able to participate in your job remotely, that makes moving to, say, Tennessee or North Carolina much easier when you can still have your job here but live there. So the housing issue, it's absolutely impossible to separate it from economic development. And it's absolutely impossible to separate it from the competitiveness of Massachusetts. If we don't really have a marked change in many of our policies, right, the very competitiveness of Massachusetts is going to really drown us, if you will, I think, in many respects. And that's where I kind of go back to what we have going on with the emergency assistance challenges we have right now. There are so many other pressing issues. We're talking about the main one, housing, that's out there, that if we continue to bleed money on this issue, we're not going to be able to, in a very targeted, deliberate way, respond to the very real needs that we have here in Massachusetts. To me, that's the biggest challenge we have right now.
So, Senator Vilas, in addition to being a state senator, you're also a veteran serving in the United States Army, and you're currently an active member in the Massachusetts National Guard. You were recently activated as part of the governor's emergency plan to deploy Guard members to, shelter sites across the state. So tell us, where did you go and what were you responsible for?
So I was all over the state. I was in, for the overwhelming majority of the time that I was on orders, I was actually in the hotels working with and interacting with really predominantly the migrant population. And then I spent some time at headquarters as well, kind of looking at some of the big picture issues that are out there. And I think one of the things that's really helped me is that I always talk a lot about the best experiences, that boots on the ground experience. You can really learn it. And one of the things that I always worry about is that when we as lawmakers make policies and we don't consider the unintended consequences. So that experience really gave me a unique insight to some of the migration challenges that we are having right now and some of the potential ways out of it. And the main takeaway that I had, and this is something that I experienced at every hotel that I went to throughout the Commonwealth, is that I made a point of sitting down and talking with the migrant population and hearing so many of their remarkable stories. And one of the things that was fascinating to me was they all raised their hand and said, we want to work. We don't want to be at these hotels. We want to get out. We want to provide for our family. The problem that we have as Massachusetts lawmakers is that only the federal government can do that. They are the only ones that can expedite that process. We desperately need them to do that because the fact that we have so many folks in our hotels right now is costing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts money. My question that I'm posing is, well, when folks leave the hotels, where are they going to go? Because we also have what we're talking about, a housing crisis right now. So every decision, the main takeaway for me was that every decision that we make in this migrant crisis, is this going to make folks more self-sufficient or less self-sufficient? And if it's going to make them more self-sufficient, we need to do it because that's the way out of this. That's the way that we stop bleeding money. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, again, how we're struggling to really gain the attention of our partners in federal government. And it's not just Massachusetts. You just saw the governor in Arizona also call up the National Guard. And Governor Hobbs was very clear in her comment. She said, I'm calling up the National Guard because the federal government is not helping. We desperately need their help. The United States Supreme Court has been very clear since 1875. Immigration is a federal issue. We can't do this alone, but we're going to do what we can while we have the ability to do it, but it's bleeding the Commonwealth money.
All right, Senator Vilas, always great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great night.
And when we return, we'll be talking with Wayfinders, a regional housing organization, about the housing and homeless situation in our area. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Wayfinders is a regional housing organization focused on creating stability and economic mobility through housing development and programs. They're also a resource for people with emergency housing needs. Joining me now is Keith Ferry, President and CEO of Wayfinders. Keith, you were back here on the program in February discussing the housing crisis, and the housing crisis continues to grow. So I first want to ask you, how has the housing crisis grown since February when you were here?
Unfortunately, the way the crisis has grown is we're seeing it in many ways. We see it in an increase in people in shelter across the state, including here in Western Massachusetts. We have over 800 families in shelter, which is something that we see through our shelter programs. We're also seeing people in continuing need with housing affordability challenges. Many people are coming to us, applying for emergency financial assistance to see if they can help fill their arrears for rent that they are unable to afford. We're seeing those increased cost burdens come to families from landlords who are also burdened with increased costs for utilities and other costs to operate their buildings. And all this creates a ripple effect in a housing market where we have a very limited supply of housing, both on the rental side and the home ownership side. So all those have come together to create a worsening situation for the lowest income households in our region and a challenging situation for moderate income families to try to find housing options and mobility options in the region.
Yeah, and so, what kinds of programs do you have that support people who are homeless or at high risk of becoming homeless?
So for folks who are homeless, we work through the state's Emergency Assistance Shelter Program to create housing options for those people in our shelters. We house 278 families currently in our shelters, and we provide them not only with housing but supports to get them back on their feet again and become stable. We also work with people to prevent them from going into that situation by providing emergency financial assistance for folks who are both troubled with paying the rent or even paying the mortgage or paying their utilities. All these things can create great housing instability, and so we run a program for the state called the Residential Assistance for Families in Transition program, where families can get financial assistance to help meet their arrears for low-income families. In addition to that, we run another program to support housing stability to prevent people either from going into shelters or once they're coming out of shelters to keep them stable once they get into a more independent situation. This program is called Home Base, and people get referred to us to work through. So there are a number of different ways that we do it, and in addition we provide counseling and supports through our housing consumer education centers, which are located in 3 places throughout the region: in Holyoke at 193 Chestnut Street, in Springfield at 1780 Main Street, and in Northampton at 256 Pleasant Street.
And are you seeing, your programs, are you seeing increased applications or interest? What are some of the numbers?
We're certainly seeing increases, especially in our emergency financial assistance programs. A year ago, we were seeing about 500 applications a week. over the last several months, we've been seeing upwards of 700 applications a week. These are people, again, coming to us, homeowners, renters, coming to us, needing assistance, paying the rent, paying the mortgage, paying for utilities. And we're seeing that in all different types of communities throughout the region. It's not just our cities, but it's our towns and villages where many people are still struggling, even as we are recovering from the pandemic and we're seeing positive signs in the economy. There's still these pain points that we see. We also see a record number of people just coming to us asking for assistance through our housing consumer education centers.
And so you were named to a housing team created by Governor Healy earlier this year. What advice did the team provide for the governor and the housing secretary?
Well, at the time, there was no housing secretary. So one of the things that we advised the governor to do was to create a housing secretariat. And so we were really pleased and delighted that Governor Healy took that charge to really make sure that housing was a top tier issue for her cabinet. So that made it a cabinet level position. And we're delighted with the selection of Secretary Ed Augustus to lead that. He's got great experience and both in the Senate, and his experience in Worcester are relevant to many communities around the Commonwealth. The other thing that we wanted to make sure that the governor did was think about making kind of huge investments in housing, investments that are at the scale to begin to address the challenge. We need housing for the lowest income folks, we need housing for moderate income folks, we need home ownership opportunities to be more prevalent in our region. And so we wanted the governor to think about a more comprehensive approach to creating housing, create some new innovative programs and innovative investments, and also to consider important policy changes that could make it easier for people to access housing and it easier to develop housing throughout the region and state.
So Wayfinders is also involved in real estate development opportunities. Do you think the proposed $4 billion bond bill for housing creation is feasible?
The bond bill would be a historic investment in housing in our Commonwealth. The last bond bill was passed in 2018. It was $1.8 billion. And that was the biggest bond bill ever. This bond bill, I think, is both feasible and necessary. It not only includes the $4.1 billion investment in programs that we use regularly to develop housing, it also creates some new programs to promote homeownership development and to promote better access for developers to capital so they can more quickly and readily develop housing of all types across the Commonwealth. In addition to that, it includes important tax credits that are used to develop housing and support organizations that develop housing, like the Community Investment Tax Credit, which supports community development corporations. And then in addition to that, it also has a number of important policy pieces that not only are around developing and supporting the creation of more housing, but also protecting the most vulnerable people to help them create better access to housing. Things like eviction record sealing to help people move on from maybe a bad past history to better access to housing in the future. So there are many things in the bill that I think are important and necessary to be much more comprehensive in addressing our housing needs across the Commonwealth for all different types of people in all different parts of the region, and as well as the demographics that we see coming into our office, which are not just people who are the lowest income, but moderate income people and homeowners as well.
And I just want to quickly ask you, what are your biggest concerns about the housing crisis, especially when it comes to Western Massachusetts?
My biggest concern is that we won't take advantage of this opportunity that we have right now. It is clear to everyone that housing is some tremendous need. It's a need across all different types of populations. And my biggest concern is that the state and our communities won't seize the moment here to invest in our future. This is about the future of our region. This is about the future of our Commonwealth. We must continue to build better housing options to meet the demographic changes that are upon us, more senior housing, more housing for people of the lowest incomes, and more housing for people who are trying to start households and create new families. And so it's important that we invest now to make historic investments and make historic policy change so we can create equitable and thriving communities throughout Western Massachusetts and the Commonwealth overall.
All right, Keith Ferry, President and CEO of Wayfinders, we thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
And after the break, we'll be talking housing and other programs offered by the Center for Human Development. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back. You're watching 22 News in Focus, and the Center for Human Development is an agency that provides multiple social services for individuals and families, including housing. Joining me now is Teresa Nicholson, Program Director for the Homelessness Prevention Program at CHD. Thanks for joining us today. So for people who aren't familiar with CHD, when and why was the organization founded, and what's your mission?
CHD was founded in 1972 and provides a broad range of high-quality, community-oriented human services dedicated to promoting, enhancing, and protecting the dignity and welfare of people in need.
And Teresa, tell us how you're funded.
We are funded through state and federal grants as well as private donations.
And about how many people do you say that you help annually with your programs?
Our agency serves over 27,000 people per year.
And I want to ask you now about some of those housing programs. Let's talk about Jesse's House first.
Jesse's House is one of the first family shelters in Massachusetts. Jesse's House serves the community for over 40 years. It provides services for stabilization for up to 6 homeless families, and our job is to provide self-sufficiency, and our ultimate goal is always to move people onto permanent supported housing. We've been located in a beautiful Victorian-era home in Amherst, and we partner with the First Congregational Church, which is also our neighbor next door. We're very proud of that partnership.
And how can our viewers learn more about Jesse's House?
You can go to our website, and on our website you can learn more about Jesse's House.
And let's talk now about the 3 shelter models that are being offered.
First, what I'd like to say is that CHT is very dedicated to serving those that are most disenfranchised. We have just shy of 400 units of supported housing for the homeless, and we have 50 units for individuals. So we offer 3 different types of shelter models. We have a congregate shelter where people get their own room. Families will get their own room and get to always stay together. And they have meals together, and then they also share common space with other families. We also have a model called co-sheltering, and that's where we provide no more than 2 families per apartment where they share some common space, but they also have their own space to raise their families. Then we offer scattered site, and that's where each family gets their own apartment where they are able to live with their family independently. And lately, because of the crisis in family shelter and the number of people that are homeless, we also now offer motels. So right now, currently, we have 276 family units in one of those models, and we also have 120 families that are living in hotels. So we serve just about 400 people per day in our shelter models.
And where are these units located?
They're located throughout Western Mass, primarily in Hampden and Hampshire counties.
Yeah, are you seeing an increased need for these shelters? I think you just explained to us all the numbers you're seeing, but why is it that you're seeing such an increased need?
Well, I think we've heard a lot from Keith, who spoke before me. We are in an all-time crisis of homelessness, specifically in family homelessness in the state of Massachusetts. We have seen the numbers go from 3,500 across the Commonwealth to now the governor needing to have to cap for safety to 7,500 units. And right now, as of today, there's over 300 people that are on the waiting list to even get into shelter.
Yeah, 300 people on the waiting list. I want to move now to ask you, who's eligible and how do they apply?
Yes, for family shelter, people need to apply to Housing and Livable Communities, the state agency that administers the Emergency Assistance Shelter Program. And they can call the phone number in order to see if they're eligible, and that number is 866-584-0653. And eligibility requirements are to be a Massachusetts resident, be 115% below poverty level, pregnant or having children under the age of 21, no fault, a fire condemnation, whether your house was condemned by fire, or have a an eviction that was no fault of your own, or you'll be fleeing domestic violence, or the apartment where you're living or the place where you're living could be a health or safety risk for your children. So if anyone has those issues and are finding themselves thinking that they may become homeless, they should call the number that I just mentioned. And for individual homelessness, we have a outreach and triage program, and for those finding themselves at risk of homelessness or who are currently homeless and living on the street, they can call 413-867-0398 to be connected with one of our outreach or triage workers.
And due to the current housing crisis, do you have any overflow emergency shelter sites? You mentioned the motels, but anything else?
Well, the motels are currently one of our overflow solutions to our state crisis, and the state Housing and Livable Communities is also looking for other possible solutions in the long term or short term when we talk about more than 300 people being on the current waiting list.
How about programs that help people move into permanent housing, and what does that consist of?
For us, the ultimate goal of anybody who's either living out on the street or living in either family or individual shelter is to get them to a safe, affordable home that they can call their own in a permanent way. We always want homelessness to be rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. So we at CHD offer a number of different housing programs. So right now we offer 95 units for individuals that were formerly homeless, and we have approximately 130 units for families that were formerly homeless that are now living in their own apartment, and we have 30 units for young adults that we also work with the city of Springfield through the HUD program.
Yeah, young adults, like you just said, runaway and homeless youth also being impacted. I want to ask you, what is the safety zone?
The Safety Zone Emergency Shelter provides 24-hour short-term housing for young people ages 14 to 17 who have left home who are homeless. These temporary youth shelters are located throughout Western Mass. Our goal is to reduce the problem that homelessness and runaway youth face by providing counseling, crisis intervention, temporary shelter, and aftercare services. Young people can contact CHD directly or be referred by parents, court, school, community agencies, or state agencies.
And are you seeing an increase in demand for housing services for teens and youth?
We are seeing an increase in demand for everyone. So whether it's youth, young adults, families, or individuals, we are at an all-time crisis when it comes to affordable housing in the state of Massachusetts.
And what are some of the reasons, that this age group ends up finding themselves in need of emergency housing?
It could be anything from trouble at home. It could be not being able to find or keep a job. It could be, getting into a little bit of trouble that most of us got into maybe when we were young and not having the resources or parental or family support to be able to get you through it. There's so many different reasons that we see people running into these days. And mostly, as we've already heard, safe, affordable housing is at an all-time low right now in the state of Massachusetts. And that definitely impacts all of the homelessness that we're seeing right now.
And how do these individuals get referred to you?
They get referred to us. We have, are you talking about the referrals for our youth come through our Navigation Youth Homelessness Hotline, and that's at 413-781-6556. And that is in partnership with the Gandara Center, and youth and young adults can call that number, or providers can call that number to be referred to our youth homelessness programs.
And just again, for our viewers who might just be joining us now, just tell them again how they can learn more about the CHD Homeless Prevention Program.
CHD programs, all of our programs, you can go to chd.org on our website, and you can find more information about any of the programs that I've mentioned today.
Okay, Teresa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The Springfield Rescue Mission has been helping people for over a century, and we'll learn about their programs once we return. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We're back now with 22 News in Focus, and our next guests are from an organization that's been helping people in need in the Springfield area for over 100 years. Joining me now are Kevin Ramsdell, Executive Director and CEO, and Sabra Ramsdell, Chief of Staff for the Springfield Rescue Mission. Thank you both for joining me on the program today.
Well, thank you very much for having us here tonight. Basically, we've been in existence since 1892. Julius Cummings and his wife saw some homeless folks hanging around the neighborhood and invited them in, and it grew to what we know today, where we now have 2 facilities. We have an emergency shelter over at 148 Taylor Street, and we have a rehabilitation program at 10 Mill Street, which used to be the old Orr Cadillac building.
Yeah, and so you offer a men's emergency shelter as well. Tell us, a little bit about that.
Okay, the men's emergency shelter houses about 40 individuals a night. We also have people in transitional living that stay there as well, that are in their 2nd year with us, and that houses 10 people. And it's full every night. About a year ago, we saw the need, and instead of being open just 6 days a week, we're now open 7 days a week there as well.
And let's talk about the eligibility requirements.
Pretty much anybody can come in to the emergency shelter. I mean, it is a men's only shelter, and they just need to be able to come through the metal detectors and whatnot, because we do make sure nobody's bringing any weapons or needles in, and they need to be able to stand up. So we do take people in that may have been drinking a little bit or whatever, but if you can't stand up, we can't let you in because it's a safety issue. But pretty much it's people that are also working that just have no place to go, so they will come to us. They're allowed to stay up to 40 days, and then they have to take a 14-day break so that we can allow other folks that are on the waiting list to get in as well and take advantage of some of the programs that we offer there.
Yeah, and are you seeing an increase in need for this emergency shelter, and is there a specific demographic, or are you just seeing all ages? Sabra,
Well, the demographic has changed, I think, quite a bit, to speak to what the other 2 guests were talking about. It used to be the age range was probably, anywhere from 30 to 50. But nowadays we're seeing a huge uptick in the number of younger people that are coming in, both to the emergency shelter and applying to get into the rehabilitation program. We also have a larger contingency of elderly people. So the demographic has really changed. I should add too that the emergency shelter feeds the rehabilitation program, because once a man enters the emergency shelter, it's an opportunity for us to share with him what we have to offer to help him better his situation. And so the rotation becomes 40 days in the emergency shelter, possibly entering the rehabilitation program, which is up to a year or more, and then transitioning over to the supportive housing side, transitional living. And all in all, that gives a man about 3 years in which to become self-sustaining through our programs.
And again, we're not a medical rehabilitation center, and a lot of people get that confused. We don't do anything with any of the medical portions. That we do send out to Gandara and other places like that. So there's facilities out there that we can actually turn people to that need the help and want to get the help and want to go through detox. That's one of the things we deal with all the time in the emergency shelter, is the detox part of it. A lot of guys, in order to get in there, they do have to have an ID, so that is one thing that we do stress. Because a lot of times people will try to come in and they'll give you an alias name or what have you. We want an actual picture ID so we can identify who's in our facilities at all times.
And you briefly touched on the transitional living program. I want to have you just
Yes.
delve a little bit more into that. Who's eligible, and the services that are offered as well?
Technically, the men that are eligible for the transitional living program will have graduated from the Men's New Life side, which is the rehabilitation side. We offer a range of services because 3 years ago we decided that we really needed to become more holistic in our treatment. So that means that now we are able to offer physical and mental health components. We recently partnered with, actually today, Caring Health opened an on-site medical facility, a clinic for us that treats only our residents right now and the emergency shelter residents, but that's a huge step up for the type of health care that they need. And to have that on site is a real blessing. But we offer physical health, mental health components. A lot of our staff have now undergone education in mental health training. We offer the HiSET, which is high school equivalency, both the prep work and the testing on site. We offer a full financial wellness program and a lot more. So we've become a lot more holistic in the way in which we approach treatment. And our goal is to see each individual over that 3-year period obtain full independence.
Yeah, we want them to have a balanced life. All of our programs are Christian based, so we want them to have a good biblical base, as well as we want them to be productive members in society when they come back out there. We want them to get off the government programs and show them the way. So a lot of our funding too, we don't accept any government money because we're trying to set the ball in works that they can see that if we can do this without relying on government money, so can they. So what we really want to do is see them get back out in the workforce, paying taxes, and really being able to get a decent job. We don't want them to settle for just a McDonald's job or something like that. We want to find out what did they inspire to do when they were a child, what stopped them. And if we can get them to realize the fact that they do have some worth and they do have a skill set that they can rely on, and if it's something that they love to do, they'll never work a day in their life and they'll actually enjoy it. So that's our goal, is to get them back stable and be productive members in society when they leave us. And again, we've had to change our program to individual based because everybody's needs are different. So we've learned over the last couple of years the things that we need to look for. So if a person is willing to roll up their sleeves and put some effort into it, we'll get behind them through Mass Hire, help them to get back into school. We have a gentleman now that's back in college earning his degree. We have another person that graduated the program that has finally bought his first house. So we're just seeing a number of things that are going on there since we moved to this more holistic approach to what we're doing at the Springfield Rescue Mission.
Yeah, really big milestones right there to be proud of. So you offer several meal programs, including public holiday meals at Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, as well as breakfast and lunch. I want to ask you, who can come in for the breakfast and lunch program, and how many meals do you think you serve daily?
Well, anybody is welcome at any meal, holidays included, and we never turn anybody away. If you knock on our door and you're hungry, you will have a meal. And you will not only have a meal, but you will have clothing and hygiene items and whatever we can assist you with. So our doors are really never closed to that. We serve, honestly, about 800,000 plus meals per year. And that consists of what goes on a daily basis. We serve about 250 a day. And on the days when we have our mobile food program, which is called Operation Sunshine, we have a van that goes out into the community and serves hot soup and sandwiches 3 days a week. And they will go through 300-400 sandwiches a day. So by the time you add all that up, it's a lot of food.
Amen.
A lot of food comes in and out.
Yeah, and before we head to the break, I just want to ask you, how can individuals or organizations get involved in helping, you continue your mission?
There's a number of ways that they can get involved through volunteering. We always need help in the different areas because we couldn't do what we do and reach the people we do without our volunteers. So there's opportunities to work in the warehouse, to sorting clothing, to restocking our giveaway center, which is like our small Walmart store. And everything that we do there is free of charge as well. We don't charge for any of our services there. You can actually get involved in slicing and dicing if you like to get involved in the kitchen work. You can come in and go out on Operation Sunshine. What I would suggest that you do if you're interested in helping us in that way is come by for a tour at our 10 Mill Street location. We'd love to show you firsthand what we do there each and every day. And again, you can check out our website. There's a lot of opportunities on there as well, current events and things that we're doing. It's www.springfieldrescuemission, all one word, .org.
All right, we thank the both of you for being on our program and providing some really important information.
Thank you very
for
much.
having us.
Homeless teens and youth face many obstacles. We'll find out how Dial Self Youth and Community Services provide support. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Back here now, one segment of the homeless population that's hard to count is that of teens and youth. Many who seek relief from an abusive home or are phased out of the foster care system and find themselves couch surfing, looking for temporary shelter with friends and extended family. Underage homelessness may not seek social services out of fear of being put into the foster system. Those over 18 may not be eligible for some social services, and many work 2 or 3 jobs and still can't afford an apartment. So joining me now is Phil Ringwood, Executive Director of Dial Self Youth and Community Services, and Miranda Hastings, a member of the Franklin, Hampshire Youth Action Board. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So let's just start with some background. Phil, what is Dial Self and how were you founded, and your mission as well?
Sure. Dial Self is a small nonprofit. We were founded in the late 70s by 4 individuals who really wanted to help support young people who were falling through the cracks in the system. Today, our mission is to help youth and young adults support their autonomy by helping them connect to housing, education, income, and civic engagement opportunities. And we kind of have a wide range of support services that range from street outreach to drop-in centers with food pantries, basic hygiene items. We also have a variety of housing supports that we have in place that I can talk about a little bit later. And we also have a great program that's a community service learning program, AmeriCorps, that provides youth work job training and helps place AmeriCorps members for a year of service at a variety of other nonprofits and schools throughout the Connecticut River Valley.
And Miranda, what's Youth Action Board, and what is your role in addressing the housing issues?
So Youth Action Board is a community of 18 to 24-year-olds who meet to discuss housing needs in the area. We support each other and the greater community of Franklin, Hampshire, and Berkshire counties. We offer resources for people, we host discussions, and we also collaborate on projects within the center and in the greater community. I found the Youth Action Board through Community Action Pioneer Valley's website, which is really accessible, and working with them has given me a newfound sense of purpose and passion for life.
Yeah, that's great. And Phil, are you seeing an increase in need for emergency housing and permanent housing for teens and youth?
Absolutely. We're definitely in a housing crisis. We've talked about that a bunch on the show already, and that housing crisis is for individuals, for families, and definitely youth and young adults are part of those families, and it really I think, disproportionately impacts a lot of youth and young adults in this area, and we're certainly seeing an uptick right now.
And the Massachusetts Unaccompanied Homeless Youth Commission has a youth count report. This report looks at the scope, needs, and demographics of youth and young adults under the age of 25 who are unstably housed or experiencing homelessness. The summary of the 2022 report found that the number of unsheltered youths is 38% higher than in 2019 before the COVID-19 pandemic. Phil, what would cause such a dramatic increase?
Well, I think the pandemic created a lot of just added chaos, trauma, uncertainty in the lives of so many families, and the young people were part of that. And I think we've seen folks who are really dealing with the after effects of some of the, we had some great programs that provided extra cash payments and supports for families. We had an eviction moratorium for a while, and I think as that disappeared, you found a lot of families who are doubled up are now trying to find their own units of housing, and they're not finding any. And the price of housing is just absolutely astronomical in our area these days. In the Franklin, Hampshire region, where Dial Self is doing a lot of work with young adults, we're seeing the cost of an apartment starting at like $1,100, often ranging up to $2,300. When you look at first, last, security, and then a lot of places now are also charging brokerage fees that can be up to a month's rent. You're talking, $3,000, $5,000, $6,000 for a young person that they need to have to get into an apartment right now. And that's just the start of it, because young folks who are applying to apartments are competing with people who have more credit history than they do. They have more rental history. A lot of times they have higher paying jobs. And so a young person who's now in the queue for an apartment, even if they can pull off the resources to jump in there, they're now oftentimes getting put to the bottom of the pile by the landlords and by property managers.
Yeah, and Miranda, what are your thoughts on the increase?
I think also COVID really reset our priorities and made young people realize how valuable they really are, making them not want to contribute to a workforce that doesn't value them.
And Phil, what are some of the reasons that teens and youth are telling you that they're homeless?
Well, I think you touched on it a little bit right at the beginning. I think fear is a huge piece for those folks who are under 18 in terms of what's going on for them. They're saying that they don't feel safe at home. That can be as a result of family dynamics. It can also be a result of just the state of the home they're in, the environment that they're in physically. In a lot of cases, a whole family may be experiencing homelessness or housing instability, and a young person might be looking for support for their whole family, or they may be trying to just find support for themselves so that they can stabilize.
And why is this such an issue for people under the age of 18?
Oh, well, I think under 18, you've got a lot of pieces where you don't have the same level of access to supports and services that adults have. There's a lot of decisions that you're not able to make yourself, and there's a lot of stigma about getting into state systems. So the youth who are finding themselves in these challenging situations are often folks who are not wanting to identify themselves as the fact that they're under 18, and they don't want to be coming into a system that's going to take them away from their friends or their family or move them around and lose their sense of autonomy.
Yeah, and Miranda, what are the challenges for young people to maintain housing when they do have it?
So yeah, it's really tricky. One problem is landlords taking advantage of the fact that young people often don't have access to legal help. And another big thing is transportation from apartment to job to appointments is just unfeasible for people in rural areas. Another thing is the cliff effect, which happens when people who are on benefits get disqualified because they have a slight pay increase or start working another job, which means they lose the benefits they desperately needed.
Yeah, and just lastly, how can our community help support Dial Self?
I think cash donations are always great, but I think a big piece is becoming involved, learn about the programs around, do some research. If you're a landlord or you know people who have housing right now, a huge thing is to reach out, find a youth serving agency, partner with them, connect with them, figure out how to make a good back and forth relationship between each other. That's a huge way right now that would help not only Dial Self, but also other agencies that are trying to support young people in attaining housing.
And just quickly, what would you say to young people needing, help right now?
Across the whole country, if you need help, you can call 1-800-RUNAWAY or go to 1-800-RUNAWAY.org, and that will bring you to resources near you wherever you are in the country. And if you're in Massachusetts, you can dial 211, and you'll also get a referral to an agency that's able to support you wherever you are in Massachusetts.
And please just know you're never alone.
Okay, Phil and Miranda, really important information, crucial for our youngest viewers as well. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
And I'll have some final remarks, that is, after a short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Thanks for sticking with us. You've been watching 22 News in Focus, and today we've been discussing the housing crisis in Massachusetts and the resources available to people facing homelessness in our region. We want to thank all of our guests for being on the program today and providing their expertise on this pressing issue. And thanks to you at home for joining us. If you missed any of the program, you can find it on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a very happy new year.